I'm Stephan, Assembly Lead at DeHealth, and today I'm very delighted to launch and present all of you a new chapter, the health ecosystem, which will be dedicated to the industry leaders, experts, professionals, investors, and just personalities who you want to follow and learn from. We are starting a series of powerful talks where we'll be discussing the world business in the context of its latest developments, achievements, challenges in some way, as well as get to know closer the world of startups, fundraising, innovations, and advanced technologies. I'm fully confident this conversation will be quite informative and full of valuable insights for all of you guys. You definitely cannot miss it. And right away, I'm very pleased to introduce our first guest. Please welcome Eric Kadyrov, venture capitalist, former investment banker, tech entrepreneur, and the founder of a global platform PrivateTechNetwork. In this episode, we will talk with Eric about his successful business, about fundraising in today's economy, about startups, of course, about health tech and biotech industry, and what we can expect from all of it in 2023. I cannot really wait, so let's get started. While preparing for this interview and researching your impressive experience, I realized that we can talk about many important topics that are relevant today. But anyway, I'd like to delve deeper into the area where you're truly a game changer, innovator, and it's venture capital and entrepreneurship. You're the founder of a PrivateTechNetwork. It's a platform that enables tech founders, venture capitalists, and private tech investors to close deals faster and more efficiently based on big data and artificial intelligence. Tell us a bit more about this platform.
Yeah, Stefan, it's a good question. I think we live in the age of startups. Like every day you read about some kind of new company being created, and I'm sure many people have their own startup ideas. And I also get like some new exciting idea like almost every week. Like I would like to automate art auctions, HR, etc. 2 minutes on myself. I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley. I worked for HP, which at the time was one of the biggest and greatest and most exciting tech companies, maybe like Google now, right? And several years I was also in the office of strategy. So as you can imagine, I had a lot of exposure to different technologies and different companies in tech, and I'm really excited by technology. And obviously HP, a lot of innovation came from HP. Maybe to make it interactive, I should, quiz you. So HP, you see maybe some laptops now, right? So HP invented a whole lot of technologies. Obviously laptops, a lot of servers, data centers, obviously printers, right? Laser jet printers, inkjet printers, which now became a huge industry, like 3D printers, right? It all was invented by, if you like, thousands of patents. And then if you look at computing, right, a lot of processor standards, a lot of memory standards, and even like processor architecture, driving mobile phone, right? The processor is made by ARM, one of the biggest, called Advanced RISC machines. And then RISC architecture was invented by HP. And obviously we had a huge influence over many industry consortiums, like memories. You use now DDR2 and DDR4. And then semiconductor consortiums like Sematech, etc. So in Silicon Valley, you have this exciting spirit, or the feeling, like you think about what is future,
startup
like
spirit.
What is next, right?
Like
yeah,
future
startups,
is
but you think
place.
about it like in a broad sense. Like what's the future like? When I was growing up, you were reading like science fiction, like Ray Bradbury, right? Now everybody reads Ray Dalio, who runs huge hedge fund, but and in Silicon Valley, you think about, future, like what's the future of TV? What's the future of processor? Like what's the future of travel? So this spirit. And then I also like finance. Right. So I work for two big investment banks. Actually, Credit Suisse and UBS are one of the top 5 investment banks, and I'm really excited by finance as well. Finance, like how investment bank works, how hedge fund works, like what's the derivatives, all this like Madoff scandal. How come he lost 70 billion, right, for investor? How is this possible?
Yeah.
Right? And in Credit Suisse, I actually was one of the architects of the private markets platform. And private markets is everything you do not see on Bloomberg. On Bloomberg, you see Facebook, Apple, all these public companies, right? But then private markets is a huge chunk of market, like private companies, venture capital, private equity. And I specialize in two types of deals. One is helping startups to raise capital. If you're raising, around A investment 5 million or 10 million, we help you to raise capital. One type of the deal. And second type of the deal is to invest in private technology companies. And I think this is really exciting. Think about Uber or Airbnb, 5 years before IPO, right? Think about when you invest in Facebook, you have 1 million people globally investing in Facebook, or people like buying Bitcoin. But when you invest in private company, you get a chance to invest in the best, right? And obviously you can get a chance to experience really high returns, like really huge VC-like numbers. I think my average return over a decade of investing is something like 55% per year, like year over year.
That's impressive.
And then some point, I started thinking like, how do I automate myself? Because you think about transaction, you raise capital, and people do it like 20 years ago. You do a pitch deck, and then you call venture capital funds, and it takes a long time. It's a very slow process, right? And now we have all the data science and all the AI tools, right? So you think it should be something better than this, right? So this private tech network idea was really started as an idea to, develop some tools to automate, what I do like daily. And when we do transactions, I want some place.
Connect investors
when you have a location,
and startups.
Yes, but you start with information. And the basic question is like, what are the venture capital funds in the UK? Or what are the venture capital funds in the US? Like, where do you get the information? I mean, you can read Forbes, you can read Crunchbase, you can read like TechCrunch, and you can spend like 2 months like just reading about venture capital funds, and still you don't have a like full picture, because every week, there are some new funds being launched. So our idea is to have AI tools, and we do like text mining, and we analyze. It takes you a long time to read 1,000 pages, but AI can do it in like microsecond. And so we have really precise data. And once you have the data, it's like, what do you do next, right? You have to connect. So you have to go out and you have to call funds to connect with them. So we need to have some kind of communication tools built into platform. And then once you connect, I think the next step is, what do we do? Like, ideally, we do transaction, we do deal, right? The fund invests in you. So our vision was to have AI and data tools to have, B2B type of network platform that can really help to speed up the deal flow. So this is, answer on your question, like, how did I come up with the idea?
Delving deeper into artificial intelligence, like a few years ago, artificial intelligence was something like incomprehensible for me personally, super complex and imperfect. But now we are witnessing its massive adoption in absolutely everything. Artificial intelligence is the main trend and forecast for 2023. But I wonder if the world is ready for such a fast and massive adoption. Maybe there's an industry that is not ready for such a development at all. What do you think about this question?
Stephan, I think it's a great question. Like, is the world ready, right? I think the world is not ready. But you have to ask a bigger question, because now you have a huge number of changing startups, literally like changing like all aspects of our life, right? We spoke about Uber, right? Like 5 years ago, we didn't have taxi like in your phone, right? Like Airbnb, right? But then think about fintech. Like in PrivateTechNetwork, we track fintech, and we have and these are private companies that not too many people know about. And we have something like 2,000 companies in fintech. Like, can you imagine this? So I think the pace of change is really unprecedented, like totally unprecedented. Like, take an example of fintech and like neobanks, right? Like in Ukraine, you have this neobank, Manoryk, which is now #1 bank, right, in several years. But then there are many neobanks, and the same neobank. And the same Manoryk in UK is called Revolut. Very much similar technology. And then if you look at Revolut market cap, it's something like $40 billion, right? 40 billion, young startup. And then, I work for Credit Suisse, and Credit Suisse is like big bulge bracket, financial institution, more than 100 years history, many offices globally, right? And you look at market cap of Credit Suisse, and it's like 20 billion. It's like less than Revolut, right? So this is pretty amazing, like the pace of change. And the same is happening in like insurance. Yeah. In insurance, there are startups doing like insurance aggregation. There is a company called VFox in Germany, right? So you go in mobile app and you pick insurance and you buy insurance, right? And there was like 5 billion. So, and then we have all the stuff related to blockchain and crypto, right? Huge change.
Yeah.
Think about blockchain transactions. Just a simple example. Binance, the big, exchange in crypto. Binance was audited recently, and as part of audit, they were asked to do a transaction to move 2 billion. And they did move 2 billion. And you think about what does it take to do $2 billion in like conventional manner from one bank to another, right? It would take you maybe 4 weeks and maybe like $15 million you would pay. And then in Binance, they moved 2 billion in something like 20 minutes, and it was costing like $50, right?
Yeah.
Right. So the pace of change is huge. I think it's all across the board. It's obviously not only fintech. Huge changes in AI and biotech, in energy, everywhere. So I personally call it like age of total disruption, when like everything gets changed, right? And rather fast. And AI, I think, is a separate topic. I think in AI we see huge explosion and all kind of applications and all kind of companies, including in biotech, health tech, etc.
And we will witness
obviously in AI, you think
bigger adoption in like next year or something in almost every industry, if not in every industry.
Yes, almost every industry. But going back to your question, I think society is not ready because like technology is so much ahead of society. Especially you see it in like legal frameworks, right? You can do things like crypto transactions banned in some countries like China, right? You can do transactions on blockchain to tokenize equity. You don't have to go through conventional IPO. You can issue token and sell, right? And this is not allowed legally, like in many jurisdictions, but possible technically. And then I think in AI, it's like a huge explosion. I think we track more than 500 AI companies. There are some AI applications that become like mainstream. Think about face recognition applications or speech recognition on translation, right? And I'm speaking about even before ChatGPT was released, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then you think about all kind of tasks. Obviously, ChatGPT, you can do copywriting. It can run, write text for you really fast. Like impacts copywriting. Like HR technology, you can write your like job specs. Content generation, DALL-E, right? It can like make art for you.
Yeah.
So I think we see like a huge explosion across many applications. I think many will have really big impact on our life. I think now it's difficult to predict like what will happen. And as far as society and like what happens to like society, legal frameworks, or like central banks, I think we'll see. But my feeling is technology is like much faster. Like
society is not ready. Society needs just a little bit more time, and then we will just take only advantages of these old implementations. So just a little bit of time, I think, for all of us. And
I think this is correct. I think this is the right way to put it. But also the pace, the speed really accelerates, right? The speed. So some things we do not see, they really come live really fast. And I think ChatGPT is a good example, right? It took, like there is a graph how long it takes to reach 1 million users. And like Spotify took like half a year, and Facebook was like more than a year. And ChatGPT is 5 days. 5 days, 1 million users. And now it's like in tens of millions.
Yes.
Yes, insane. But I think this is power of digital models. Once you have something valuable and functional, you can immediately reach like big audiences. But yeah, totally insane. I agree with
Bigger
you.
and bigger.
Like I'm playing with ChatGPT like all the time now. It can write code for you. It's like totally amazing and like mind blowing.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer. Let's move on a little bit and talk about what you have dedicated your life, your entire career to, the startup market in general. As a venture capital expert, you know kind of everything about it. And speaking about 2023, if we take into account the challenges of the current economy situation, the recession, and the kind of transition stage with numerous changes, how can a startup can attract investment? What should be done to raise funds in the current conditions?
Yeah, Stephan, you mentioned I know everything. Indeed, I worked with many venture capital funds. Last more than a decade. Like I know many funds know me, including some big guys like SoftBank. But one of the reasons I started like PrivateTechNetwork is like regardless how much you know, right? At some point you realize your brain and you are limited, right? I realized that I know 300 funds, but there are many more funds, right? It's kind of like Kung Fu, right? Shaolin Kung Fu. Once you say you're an expert, then your development stops. And this is the reason we started this, this approach. But in PrivateTechNetwork, I have probably one of the biggest databases of private tech investors globally. It's close to 80,000, right? Like mapping the whole world. Maybe half is
separated
US,
to all the
industries.
industries.
Yes, we analyze by industry, by ticket size, by name, by portfolio. It's like a big data exercise, and it's algorithmic because so it's kind of like a tool for your brain to analyze this data. But venture capital, it's obviously a big industry, and if you look at last year, total number of deal was like more than 300 billion. It's huge. Lots of new funds.
Massive.
In our platform, we published like 4,000 funds. Private markets are somewhat disconnected from public markets, right? So if you have Dow down like 20%, and if you have like global recession, it doesn't necessarily mean that like all the venture capital funds like stop doing deals, right? A lot of this money is private. Yeah. In fact, we also analyze like private family offices, and private family offices is usually like rich businessmen, entrepreneurs who invest, but they do not operate funds. They can invest, different amounts. And this is also a big sector because investing in technology becomes so popular. So I think, venture capital is still here. I think it's exciting. I think it's really exciting time to be in technology and do startups and, develop new products and new technology. Maybe the best time ever, right, in history. What to do to raise capital is obviously focus on the fundamental. Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. Despite all the difficulties, despite all the
all the challenges,
like COVID and what.
Still, the market has grown, I think, and great projects are getting.
Yes, globally, VC market, I think last year was maybe even the record breaking, even despite COVID, because when COVID began, obviously, people stopped traveling, but many of the VC transactions went to online, right? You can do now deals in Zoom, like without even meeting face to face, right? So to raise capital, it's always like focus on the fundamental, focus on the business and business model, on the product.
The main idea, how it works.
Obviously, yes, you obviously have, your vision for the product, for the clients, and the product needs to solve client problem, right? It needs to have value. And obviously you need to do all the preparation with like a pitch deck and all the data room, etc. And then you go out and you speak to investors. And I always recommend speaking to a lot of investors. It's kind of the marathon. Don't speak to 10 funds, speak to 100 funds, right? And do it fast. But I think you have also to know the funds, right? If you're raising a small ticket, like 3 million, you don't go to big fund like SoftBank, who does like the big size tickets, right? Or if you're raising, round in biotech, you need to go specifically to funds who invest in biotech. So kind of know your space, right, before the whole exercise.
And as a result, get more changes.
Yeah, and then just go to investors, have a discussion, and ideally close the round. And obviously, don't spend, 10 months or 12 months doing it. Do it fast.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. And during your impressive career, you have repeatedly said that every founder can raise capital for his startup, despite the fact that there is no single formula for success, of course. Maybe you know some insight that investors do not talk about, but which are crucial. What do you think?
Oh, the insights.
Yes.
I think if you look at VC funds, they're all practical, funds. They want to make money, right? And if you look at successful VC funds, they incredibly successful. These guys are making, huge multiples. And huge multiples, they're not multiples of 5 or 10, sometimes they're multiples of like 100 or maybe 1,000, right, etc. So these guys, they want to see, big upside. They want to change. They want to see product that really changes, way things done, or like changes industry. They want to see some kind of uniqueness, or maybe some intellectual property, or like integration that you have. Obviously, VC funds invest in people, right? So VC funds would like to see, CEO who have done startups or, raised capital, all the things that the CEO
as a
needs
representative of the company. Yes.
What else? They want to see like big growing market, right? Your market needs to grow, like blockchain now, or like fintech now, or like API integration, right? They don't want to invest in, some kind of old school manufacturing plant, right? That goes down, the industry shrinks.
And
so
also,
big and yeah.
I think that for a founder, you don't need just to show, present like pitch deck, or I don't know, just the idea. You should show the process of the company, like it's already like getting profit, it's already making profit, it's already have the team, and it's working. So it's not just idea; it's already business in a process, and you just have to scale it and to get funds for make it bigger, make it more global. And I think the founders have to understand these moments first of all before going to invest.
For sure.
Or your
you
business
need to have
has to
prototype,
work.
like MVP. Yeah, they want to see traction. They want to see unit economics. Like these are like rather standard things, but again, like no two funds are the same, and maybe no two startups are the same, right? They're all different, and they're all like tackling different directions in different markets. And obviously there is like a big difference in geographies. Like in our database, like half of the funds are US. And if you look at deals and capitalization and like even the valuation numbers,
we will talk about
for the same companies.
Locations. Yeah, we'll talk about locations a little bit more because I'm very curious about that. And I'd like to ask the following question. What can you say, for example, about the biotech, beauty tech, health tech industry, how dynamically it is developing right now, currently, in this year?
So I separate biotech and digital health. So biotech is more like genomics related. And both biotech and digital health is one of the most funded industries, obviously not only in the US.
In recent years.
It's one of the most funded, yes, globally, one of the most dynamics. There are a lot of unicorns. Actually, when I was doing the preparation, I put together like a slide on this. Maybe I should share a screen.
That's clear.
So, Stephan, I separate like biotech, which is more like genomics and everything related to genes, right? And digital health. And in digital health, like these are all subcategories. So AI, this is like all the AI companies applying AI to like medical diagnostics, like clinical experience, etc. Telehealth is all the telemedicine, all the startups doing medicine remotely. Then medical devices, companies that do all kind of wearables to measure your, life signs, etc.
Kind of watches.
Mental health. Yeah. Mental health is a whole big, direction, also well funded. I think in Ukraine there is an interesting startup which was launched now in US. It's called Calmary. All kind of apps. Then digital therapeutics and omics. This is, everything related to data, right? And then other than that, genomics and biotech, you see literally hundreds of companies, and in genomics, all kinds of new exciting technologies. CRISPR, when you can like edit your gene, and drugs by design, etc., etc. Yeah, but basically, it's very dynamic sector. I think we see all kind of business models, all kind of applications, different geographies. Obviously, in biotech and healthcare, AI and like data is playing a big role, because I think if you look at like how we treat, and like I personally treat my medical data, is probably like a stone age, right? I would like to do like much better work and like do correlations and like manage my diet and like performance. But in US, there are like some really interesting startups. There is one named Forward. I don't know if you know it, but it's a California company that actually tries to change the format of the clinic and like how you interact with doctors. Like you can go and can get your diagnosis and basic measurement of your life signs in like any location.
Make it faster, more efficient, let's say.
It's actually like, you go to clinic and you see a lot of sick people, and doctors and people don't like to go to like clinic, right? Like your experience is bad. So they want to change it. Like you can go and do diagnosis in like your sport club, or maybe in like a shopping mall, in like really nice futuristic settings. And then you can see doctor from the network. You can see the best, specialist in whatever field you're interested, like based on obviously your analysis and diagnosis. You can see cardiosurgeons, or you could see like brain specialists. But then they also have like AI engine that, doctor, you see doctor, he has some recommendation, but then they have a big data analyzed by AI, which makes kind of independent opinion, right, on treatment and diagnosis. And they're quite successful. They raised more than 220 million. Actually, I know the founder, I know the CEO, and they're valued at, I think, 4 billion plus now, growing really fast, and also plan to launch internationally. So I'm no expert in obviously biotech or genomics by any means, but we just track like the funds and companies, and it's like I said, it's one of the most dynamic and one of the best funded sectors, and we will see a lot of excitement. Obviously, you guys work in this big data, which obviously I think is like a separate play, the big data.
Yeah, and we know quite well that any medical innovations and development are based on big data. And as you already mentioned, DeHealth is a leader in this direction, creating the largest medical data bank in the world. PrivateTechNetwork, where you found, is also directly related to the big data. Elaborating on this, how important is big data for investors? Do such startups have more credibility in prospects, or not really?
Stephan, my opinion is that data, or like big data, how we call it, is hugely important, and it's like really the oil of the 21st century, right? Because this is how we analyze our behavior, and this is how we make decisions. I'm not just saying because I believe in it, which I obviously do. And I think we're doing also similar play, big data, like applied to venture capital, right? But we also see some big companies created and some big exits in big data, obviously starting with the US. One of my clients actually started a company doing big data for insurance, right? And obviously we have classical insurance, but what they did is they analyzed like client behaviors, insurance policy, premiums paid, etc., like big data. And he recently sold this company for 400 million, just maybe like 2 years after start, right? So it's not only that, we say that, big data is important, but there are new companies, the companies are funded, big deals are happening and big exits are happening, right?
Big data is a new gold.
I think it's extremely important. Yes, I think, we can call ourselves like experts, but we always like kind of flying blind, right? The reason I'm saying it, I'm speaking a lot to like Google AI team, etc. And you ask yourself a basic question like, okay, we discuss what are the venture capital funds in the US, or what are the fintech companies in the US? Like very simple. And then you can punch into Google like fintech companies in the US, right? And you'll get, 50,000 pages of results that you can read for like a month, right? And you still don't know, fintech companies in the US, right? But with our technologies, this is not what I want. I want to press a button and I want to see all VC funds in US, right? And then I want to press another button and I want to see all the top guys, right, in those VC funds. And then I want to press another button. I want to send message to these guys, right, if I need.
Yes.
So this is what we want. So your question, I think big data is extremely important. I think in medicine, I think we're just scratching the surface, obviously, because like I said, like, how do I treat my own medical data? It's probably right, like 30 years ago. You go to doctor, do some analysis, right? And this is it, like somewhere on the shelf. There is no correlation to like in time. There is no correlation to medicine. There is no like integration like you guys do. There is no correlation to diet. And obviously this is possible. I would like to have all that to myself, right? I would like to measure myself and like how it can be correlated to performance or like daily tests we do. So I think really the big data is the future, you know, the way we analyze data algorithmically, also the way we, you know, use it. And we try to visualize data because I think a lot of data, but reading is very like slow. So I would like data and visual format.
Venture business in general has been developing very well lately, like as always. The world investment centers are scattered in San Francisco, in London, Zurich. Speaking about Asia, it's Singapore, Hong Kong. And during your career, you have been successfully worked in many places. And I wonder how different are the approaches to investment in this part of the world. Looking ahead to 2023, which region is investing more actively and where exactly, to your opinion?
Stephan, it's a good question. I think all these centers are really important and relevant. Obviously, they're all different. I think we talked before that US was and remains like number one and the biggest center as far as venture capital
New York,
deals.
San Francisco.
No, it's San Francisco, Silicon Valley. Lately, you know, many people move into Texas, Austin, and also Miami, right? These two centers. And obviously, New York is a big hub. Then and obviously in Silicon Valley, you have all the like big icons like, you know, Peter Thiel, like Andreessen, you know, all these huge, you know, $100 billion guys. they're all in Silicon Valley, right? But then, of course, London is a big financial center. In Europe, it's Switzerland, you know, Geneva and Zurich. And then in Asia, obviously, it's Singapore. I think in Arab world, it's Dubai. I think there are differences between funds and cultures, but I think you have to realize that many of the business models we're discussing, they're digital, right? And they're really translatable. So PrivateTechNetwork is global platform. So I would have the same discussion in basically, you know, Zurich, Texas, or Silicon Valley, or Singapore. It's going to be the same discussion. And many of the digital business models, they're translatable, right? So you can launch in many countries. You know, you can set up legal entities in many countries. You know, some investors, like in US, they may want like your head legal entity to be in US, you know, as a requirement, which you can set up. You can do it remotely. But I think the world is becoming like more of a flat place, right? You can reach audiences in many countries. You know, you can really go global. You can talk to funds. Actually, one of our platform features is that we are really international.
Thank you so much. That's a really great and profound answer. As you might already know, Wall Street predicts a global recession and inflation for this year. How does Wall Street work in general based on your experience, and how accurate do you think this forecast can be?
Stephan, it's a cool question. How does Wall Street works? You know,
yeah,
I work for biggest of the Wall Street banks, Credit Suisse and UBS, like bulge bracket. I don't understand how Wall Street works, and maybe no one understands how because I think it's really complex. Obviously, listen, you look at like I was interested in how investment bank works, like Credit Suisse, right? An investment bank is really complex. I'm speaking about like global investment bank. So you have wealth management, asset management. You have investment bank doing deals like public deals, IPOs, right? Then you have M&As. Then you have your traders. You have prop traders, and separately you have like research teams. And this is like thousands of people, right, doing all this work. And then you have all the guys working. I was working with like hedge funds and like private equity and VC funds, right? So Wall Street, okay, so investment banks, but in addition to investment banks, there are hedge funds, right? Big guys like BlackRock. Then there are private equity funds. Then there are VC funds. So it's really complex. I think it's really interesting. But I think if you're speaking about public markets, right? What happens to like Dow and the market in general, and what happens in public markets with a recession, I think you have to look back in perspective. If you look at public markets, there are always cycles. And like many people speak about economic cycles and market cycles. I think the great minds like Ray Dalio, right? You can watch his videos like how economic cycles work. But there are times when the market goes up, like the bull market, and there is a correction when there is a crisis and market goes down, right?
Yeah.
So we went through a lot of crises, like 2000 was a dot-com bubble, and then there was a long bull market till 2008, right? And then there was 2008 market crash. And now what happens? Now it's 2023. So for 15 years, the market was going up. So this is really the longest bull market, really the longest, right? In the history of humankind, like never happened before. This is number one. And then you have to look at what happened. Obviously, 3 years ago, COVID hit. And the first days and weeks of COVID, right? You remember everything was shut down. Like airlines not flying, hotels are shut down. It's like New York is dead, right?
The e-commerce was almost dead, yeah. Retail.
Yeah. So many businesses were like down a lot, and like airlines, hotels, but a lot of businesses like restaurants, right? Like sport clubs, like huge impact. And then what happened next? Basically, the central bank started money printing, right? It was a huge money printing, and US printed like $5 trillion, which is like maybe 20% of all volume of dollars printed in the last century, right? And then European central banks printed trillions, and then China. And basically what happens, and the interest rates, if you look at Fed, right, the interest rates were close to zero. So economy was not really working, really long bull market, huge money printing, right? Obviously, this will lead to inflation. So after printing trillions, what do you expect? Obviously, you expect inflation, and then now we have this war with Russia and Ukraine. On top of all the previous events, right? On top of COVID. And this war, I think this is just the beginning, because we're going to see really major economic fallout. We now see a lot of redistribution of like supply chains, like all energy, markets, etc. But this is just the beginning. And all the economic fallout in trillions, right, in Russia, which was obviously part of the system. So if you go back and like listen to Ray Dalio, it's very clear correlation. So if Fed raises interest rate by like 1%, it wipes out like 10% of the stock market, right? And now the rates are going up, so the monetary policy is not as loose as it was before. So my expectation, like in the public markets, because of all these factors, right? The inflation, the COVID, the money printing, the war, like the longest bull market in the history, we're going to see correction, or maybe we're going to see crisis. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm rather bearish. It may be big, it may be as bad as 2008. Maybe it may be worse, but my personal opinion that we'll see correction, right, in the public market. But obviously life goes on. I think, market have seen many cycles like this, and, it will recover, and obviously,
we have to be ready for the situation.
Did it answer your question? Or...
Yeah, that's what I asked. I want to understand how accurate this prediction and how like this year or maybe next year will look like in the context of economics, and that's, as far as I understood, that's normal, and we have just to be ready for the situation and do what we do our best.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is this book called Black Swan, Nassim Taleb, for like about unpredictable events, like in our life. You know this book? It's called Black Swan.
No.
It's actually, it's a great book. It's one of my favorite books. It talks about all unpredictable events, and like, I don't believe forecasts, or I don't believe analysts, because they all say, something will happen in like 6 months, and obviously it doesn't happen, and they, talk again.
The thoughts.
So obviously I don't like to forecast, and I don't like to predict, but all the events are like totally unpredictable, even that happened before, right? Like COVID, like Brexit. How many people could like forecast Brexit?
Yeah.
Okay, Russia-Ukraine war, right? It's like I didn't believe till it started, because
Same.
like war between Texas and
Same
California,
situation.
right? It's like how is this possible? So I think the world is like entering really like age of huge change, which we are witnessing now. I think war is maybe part of this big change. I think in the market, if you ask me, and if you look at all the factors, right, that I mentioned, right, money printing, Fed policy, long bull market, COVID, etc., like stagnation in Europe. You could look at what happens in Europe, and it's not really nice picture, right? Then we'll see correction, or maybe we'll see like a big crisis, like in 2008. And in 2008, the crisis was like 30% of stock market was wiped out. So we may see something like this, and we may see something like this even this year.
Got it. Very interesting thoughts.
Again, I don't want to say. Yeah. Well, the previous bull market was 8 years, and now the bull market is 15 years, right? It's almost twice as long. So if you just look at index, if you look at Dow, if you look at S&P 500, so it's almost twice as long as the previous bull market. Yeah.
We've got a really great conversation today. In conclusion, I definitely have to add this question, and sure everyone will be interested to hear from you. What advice would you give to a young entrepreneur, just a smart driving student with great ambitions?
Listen, I'm not like Bill Gates to give advices, but I like to say something.
But anyway, you have some advice.
No, I say just chase your dreams, like focus on your own goals. And I think, like we discussed before, like society changes so fast that really your goal should be like your own goal and your vision, because now it's like really difficult to rely on some sources. I think second advice, like never stop, because it's like running a marathon, just be consistent. And obviously keep working hard, If you're an entrepreneur, I think you have to work a lot. Like I was investment banker, like work week 80 to 100 hours, like every week. So just work hard, be in good shape, and
be dedicated to the world.
Yes. Be curious.
Yes, to your career, to your thing, to your project, all day long, all night long sometimes, and then you will succeed. I think in every industry, or entrepreneur, just a doctor, or anyone.
But also the project or startup needs to be like useful, right, to society.
Of course, have a main.
Because I don't know, it's also like debatable. You can make a lot of money, like say selling vodka, right, or some kind of new vodka, right? But it's like the question is ethical. Does it do good to society, or does it solve any problem?
Yes, you have to be innovator.
Society faces so many problems. Yeah.
Game change a little bit, and keep on working.
Yes, and the solution needs to solve problem and be useful to society. I really believe in it,
Thank you so much. Summing up our today's interview, I want to express my gratitude to you, Eric, for your time, for your efforts and desire to become a part of this project. Thank you for an interesting discussion, for sharing your experience, vision, valuable insights and advices, of course. It was a huge pleasure for me personally to talk and explore a lot of new things.
Thank you, Stephan. Thank you, guys.
Just an audience, I'd like to say thank you all for joining us today and watching this episode. It's highly important to learn from the best and from those who drive the world and set new trends. Write a feedback in comments and see you soon.